Welcome everyone. It's really nice to see so many people here this evening, and thank you ever so much for giving your time, or morning if you are on the other side of the world, but all the same, thank you for giving your time. I really hope that you're going to find this evening useful. So along with my fellow health coach Jodie, we'll be delivering the webinar this evening, and we'll both introduce ourselves properly in just a moment, but I'm just going to give you an overview of what we're going to cover this evening. So we're going to look at the 3 phases of womanhood and some vital elements for hormonal balance at each stage. So I'm going to begin looking at early adulthood and how we can build really good foundations at this stage. Jodie will then take over and guide us through conception, pregnancy, postpartum, and all the way into perimenopause. And she'll then hand back, and I'll pick up in perimenopause and take us right through the menopause too. You will see, I think, as we deliver this webinar, that Jodie and I have really different styles. We have different specialisms for our coaching, and we've really enjoyed collaborating and embracing those differences, because we feel that there are so many differences in the women out there who would seek out coaching, that by demonstrating different styles and different approaches tonight, we hope to show that actually there's a different kind of coaching available for all the different females who might be out there. What works for one might not work for another, and then someone will find someone who is just a perfect fit. So hopefully that's what we'll help demonstrate as well by having such different approaches. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jodie now, and she'll introduce herself.
Thanks, Susie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As mentioned, my name is Jodie. I am a women's health, nutrition, and hormone coach, and I received those certifications through World College. And then I am also a matrescence motherhood facilitator with a certificate in trauma-aware coaching, and I got that through Mama Rising. And I'm also the founder of Flourish Wellbeing based here in Fiji. I work with women, especially mums from all over the world, helping them feel supported and empowered through the big transitions of womanhood. My experience into this work began after the birth of my first daughter. I experienced deep postnatal depletion, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and I was exhausted, anxious, and I felt completely disconnected from myself. But I didn't really have anyone to talk to about that, or no one did talk about that within my circles. And I wasn't given any real support or answers during that time. And that experience became the catalyst for my study and my mission today in my work. I studied nutrition, and I started with that because I experienced firsthand how much food could influence my mood, my energy, and my healing. And from there, I moved into hormone health, wanting to really understand the deeper layers of what women's bodies go through. After the birth of my second daughter, I found myself navigating a new kind of shift, and not just the physical, but the emotional identity shift. That's when I discovered matrescence. And if you are not familiar with that term, matrescence is the transition that a woman goes through when she becomes a mother. It's much like adolescence. There are those hormonal changes, emotional upheavals, social shifts, and redefining of who we are. Matrescence gave me the language to something that I felt deeply, but I couldn't quite explain. And that's when that became a big part of my work also. Today, I'll be guiding you through how we as coaches can support women during the most significant transitions they'll face: pregnancy to postpartum, perimenopause while parenting. And we'll talk about what women go through, what support looks like within our scope, and how coaches can become a steady anchor for these seasons of life in womanhood. And I'll do this all through the lenses of my whole coaching qualifications. So that's me.
So as I said, I'm Susie, and I'm from Anora Health and Nutrition. I'm a UK IHCA registered health coach, and I completed both my CCP and my diploma with Well College. I've spent a long time in a previous career as a senior executive leader, and staff development, mentoring, coaching, they were huge, huge parts of that career. And actually they became my most enjoyable parts of that career. My job was incredibly stressful. and I worked really long hours, with my husband taking on much of the childcare as a result. However, I wouldn't have said that I was necessarily unhappy when I was in the middle of that. It wasn't really until I stepped outside of it that I could see that perhaps I didn't have much in the way of balance. I had a cancer battle, which I took on alongside ongoing secondary infertility. And so when I went into remission, and also at pretty much the same time, discovered that I was pregnant with my second child, this led me to reflect on my own health, and also my overall kind of current life balance. And as a family, myself and my husband kind of started to look at what we were doing and what we wanted to be doing. Alongside this, I'd been really frustrated by how often women that I was coaching through my previous role as leaders and aspiring leaders were bringing into our coaching aspects which went way beyond my scope. And actually, in order to focus on their roles as leaders and their roles in the workplace, I needed to look at aspects that went beyond that, but it wasn't really in my role at that time. And I became frustrated that I felt I couldn't support them properly. So I searched for a way really to combine my coaching experience and the love that I already had for working alongside women and developing them. And that's how I discovered health coaching, which has been the most amazing career shift for me. I've always loved learning. I'm very much driven by evidence-informed practice, and I've always had a passion for research, even in my previous role. So this has kind of happened alongside a really personal journey in my family with Alzheimer's, and has led me to take up a master's from September. And my research, I hope, will focus in on the impact of gut health alongside the prevalence of Alzheimer's, particularly in women, because women are far more likely to develop Alzheimer's than men. And the more that I find out, the more I want to find out. So I think possibly a PhD will follow, but we'll see. I haven't mentioned that to my husband yet, so we'll have to see what he says about that. So my special area of interest as a health coach is gut health, and its corresponding impact on other key areas and wider health outcomes, such as brain health and hormone health, which is the area that we are going to explore further tonight. So we are going to begin by looking at early adulthood, because gut health is a really critical component of overall well-being, especially for women in this phase, due to its profound influence on our fertility levels, our hormone balance, and our longer-term reproductive health. Gut health and hormone health are intricately linked through several biological mechanisms, which makes the gut a foundational aspect of that overall hormonal health. Some of the key aspects that bring these two together, we've got the gut microbiome and estrogen metabolism. The gut microbiome actually regulates estrogen levels through the estrobolome, which we will look at later on. This influences hormonal balance and reduces the risks of estrogen-related conditions when it is all functioning properly. We've got gut dysbiosis and inflammation. So imbalances in gut bacteria can really increase systemic inflammation, which can then disrupt hormone signaling and impair overall reproductive health. The role of short-chain fatty acids, because they are produced by gut bacteria and support hormonal balance by helping to reduce that inflammation, and they also modulate metabolic and immune pathways across the body. We've got thyroid function and metabolism, because gut health affects the conversion of our thyroid hormones, which influences our overall metabolism. Insulin sensitivity, because a healthy gut microbiome will improve that insulin sensitivity, which is crucial for maintaining balanced hormones and overall fertility levels. And the impact on neurotransmitters and hormone signaling, because the gut produces those neurotransmitters, which play a role in overall hormonal regulation. And finally, detoxification and hormonal clearance, because the gut aids in helping clear out excess hormones and toxins, which can help to prevent imbalances and therefore support overall health. So when we have got some dysregulation in our gut health and therefore our hormone health, what might that look like? Some key signs and symptoms. Or we can have irregular or absent periods, because a healthy gut microbiome will reduce that systemic inflammation and regulate immune responses. And it's chronic inflammation that is often linked to gut dysbiosis and can impair ovulation, implantation, and down the line, other aspects of fertility. The gut hormone axis influences hormone regulation through its interaction with the HPA axis, which is our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is a nice mouthful for me to say. And imbalances in the gut health can actually disrupt so many areas, including our cortisol levels, which then impacts on our stress responses. And this in turn might interfere with our regular menstrual cycle and ovulation itself. We can see gut dysbiosis, which can lead to some of our regular PMS type symptoms, such as mood swings, bloating, breast tenderness. And this is because a significant amount of serotonin is produced in the gut, and we'll be looking at that in a bit more detail in a minute, but this really affects our mood regulation. And so if that's not in sync, then actually it can really exacerbate any of those PMS related type mood swings that we might suffer from. And the breast tenderness and the bloating really comes from estrogen dominance, which again comes back down to that estrobolome, which we're going to look at in just a minute. Acne, we often think of hormonal acne around the jawline and the chin. Well, that's another sign of a hormonal imbalance, which we can track back to a dysregulation in the gut, because we can see an excess of androgens or an estrogen dominance, both of which can be linked to that hormonal acne. Gut dysbiosis can cause digestive issues, bloating, constipation, food sensitivities, because it will disrupt your digestion. It will disrupt the regular fermentation processes, which should be occurring in the stomach and in your guts. And it can lead to an excess in gas production, altered bowel movements, and it can lead to food sensitivities. Fatigue and brain fog can also be present, and sometimes that can be due to nutrient malabsorption, because if you do not have a healthy gut, it will impair the absorption of some of the essential nutrients like B vitamins, iron, magnesium, and these are absolutely vital. Anxiety and depression can also be seen. As I mentioned, the gut produces neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, and any dysbiosis can lead to a change in those levels and even a reduction in those levels. This can really increase our sensitivity and susceptibility to anxiety and depression. Poor gut health can overstimulate our stress response system, and this can magnify any of those feelings of anxiety that we may well have had. Some unexplained infertility signs and conditions like PCOS and endometriosis can be due to the impact on the estrobolome. We will look at that in more detail, but essentially it's imbalances within the estrobolome which can lead to these kind of conditions, because they are often linked to estrogen dominance or insufficiency, and they are the things which are driven by the estrobolome. So they can be linked quite significantly to that. Now, I did mention serotonin, and this is where the gut-brain axis becomes really important. It's actually a bidirectional communication system, so they are both able to talk to one another, and this is mediated through neural, hormonal, and immune pathways. So we've got several systems at play, and it's a really vital part of regulating your hormonal balances, your emotional health, and overall well-being in all of us. In fact, about 90% of our body's serotonin, which is crucial for mood regulation, especially that cyclical monthly mood regulation, and also a significant portion of dopamine, are synthesized, they're made in the gut. And imbalances in gut bacteria can reduce these neurotransmitter levels, which can contribute and exacerbate those mood swings, as we've mentioned. The gut microbiota also influences hormone regulation through its interaction with the HPA axis, which I mentioned at the start. This can disrupt cortisol levels. Now, you only have to scroll for 2 minutes on TikTok and you can play cortisol bingo. There's always somebody popping up, often in a really snazzy leggings set, and you can literally count how many times they mention cortisol in the first few minutes. I'm not 100% sure how all these people are checking their cortisol so regularly, unless they're getting very, very regular blood test. So it's a strange one to keep throwing out. Don't drink that coffee, it'll spike your cortisol. No, but our gut health does. It's proven that it impacts on cortisol, and it's because of that HPA axis. This can then trigger different stress responses, especially if we're dealing with chronic stress over time. Our body will try and bring that back into balance by throwing other things out of balance almost. So this can interfere with ovulation and your menstrual cycles. Lots of us will be familiar with the thyroid, and the gut can affect thyroid hormone conversion, because T4 will not be transformed into the active T3 hormone if we don't have good thyroid function. And this actually can be a really common underlying issue in infertility in people. So we can see that there are lots and lots of different things at play here, with poor gut health impacting on so many different areas. And the gut microbiome is essential for sleep as well because of its role within melatonin. So all of these things, if they're not in balance, they're just going to give us more problems. I've mentioned the estrobolome a few times, but what is it exactly? So it's a collection of gut microbes that are capable of metabolizing estrogen. So when a woman is starting to think about fertility, estrogen balance is just non-negotiable. It's absolutely vital. It regulates ovulation, it prepares the uterine lining, it supports cervical mucus production. So if your estrobolome isn't functioning optimally, then this entire system that we require can be thrown out. So what does the estrobolome do for us? So it recycles estrogen via a particular enzyme. It can take those estrogens that have been excreted by the liver and help them to be reabsorbed into circulation. A healthy estrobolome will help maintain balance. That's its job, to help maintain balance. It's going to ensure that you're neither estrogen deficient or estrogen dominant, neither of which are good. We want to be balanced. It also has a really important role in modulating inflammation because estrogen itself has anti-inflammatory effects when it's balanced and in the right amounts. So why does all of this matter? Well, if we are suffering with estrogen dominance and overactive estrobolome, then we can actually reabsorb too much estrogen. And this can lead to symptoms such as heavy periods, fibroids, and potentially even endometriosis, all of which we know could have an impact on fertility. A study in 2025, this year actually, was done by scientists based at the University of Pisa. And the study found that women with repeated implantation failure as their reason for infertility actually showed an endometriotal dysbiosis, which was associated with that particular enzyme that we need in the estrobolome, an elevated estrogen receptor. This actually suggested that estrobolome impairment can contribute to estrogen-driven inflammation and therefore infertility. The opposite of estrogen dominance would be an estrogen deficiency, so an underactive estrobolome for us. Low microbial diversity can impair estrogen recycling. So if we don't have that good mix in our gut, we're not able to recycle the estrogen effectively. This can result in a low circulation of estrogen around the body. Consequences of this could be anovulation, so we're not ovulating regularly or at all, thin endometriosis lining, poor cervical mucus, and all of these things we know can contribute to making it difficult to conceive. We also have toxic load and estrogen clearance being driven by the estrobolome. And if the gut is sluggish, then that estrogen isn't going to be cleared out effectively. And this puts extra pressure on the liver also. and increases our overall chances of having a hormonal imbalance across the board. Unfortunately, despite how critical it is, I think just, those areas alone, and it does a lot more than that, but those areas alone are vital for us as females. But despite this and its impact on overall health outcomes for women, the estrobolome is a vastly under-researched area. Specific research on the composition, the variability and the function of the estrobolome remains scarce. It's really hard to find good quality research. The interplay between the estrobolome, our systemic hormones and other microbiome functions is really not well understood. And I would say that this is just once again another example of gender disparity in research. Historically, most of the microbiome research that we see has focused on males and less specific female factors. And what we need is to start looking at these things because they are so important to us as women. So if we're thinking about how we can support good gut health and in turn good hormonal balance in this phase of our lives as women, we're going to look at food as the foundation. That's where we're going to start. Fibre-rich foods, these are crucial for estrogen clearance. Flax seeds, leafy greens, oats, lentils, all really good sources. Again, I know that we could play bingo with this on social media, but this is a really good one. Fermented foods. It's worth it. These support microbiome diversity, so things such as kefir, good quality yogurts, miso, sauerkraut, etc. However, I would say that we as coaches just need to be a little bit careful. If we're introducing fermented products to clients who are really unfamiliar with them, then it requires a gradual approach. We've got to think about taste preferences. We've also got to allow the system to adjust to the different type of digestion that's going to be at play. So you might introduce something like switching up the yogurt or kefir because they're quite mild and they're easy to get hold of. Lightly fermented vegetables, sourdough bread because it's something familiar, but again, we're just shifting slightly. But there's lots of approaches we could use. So small quantities, even blending certain fermented foods into familiar dishes can be a really helpful way to help clients take that first step on that kind of fermented food road. We often gain really good probiotics from our fermented foods, and these are beneficial microorganisms such as bacteria or yeast, and they really help impact on gut health when consumed adequately. On the other hand, not to be confused, prebiotics are non-digestible fibres or compounds, often carbohydrates. They are not the devil, and they act as food for that gut bacteria. So all of that good gut bacteria that we want in there, we then need to feed it, and that's where the prebiotics come in. So good sources might be onions, garlic, bananas, asparagus. There's lots. Also omega-3 fatty acids, vital because they help reduce inflammation and support overall hormone production. So chia seeds, get those in the breakfast. Flax seeds, oily fish, walnuts, really, really helpful. And estrogen detoxification can be supported by cruciferous vegetables. So things like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, all your nice dark leafy greens will be really good. And I always think whilst we would want to encourage our clients to avoid certain things like excess sugar, excess alcohol, it really can be much more beneficial, especially when we're starting on this journey, to focus on the positives, focus on things we might want to add in, things that are beneficial, rather than starting to talk about all the things we want them to stop and cut out, which can sound a little bit scary. Clients can often find bringing in the positives and introducing certain things an easier change than taking lots away. Beyond food, as important as it is, there are also lots of other additional interventions and support that we can offer our clients at this stage. So whilst it's really important that we as the coach have a strong education and base of knowledge in whichever sphere we're going to be coaching within, and we're going to explore with our clients, and also any interventions and support and resources that we're going to use alongside that, we don't want to baffle or overwhelm our clients with too much language or concepts that perhaps aren't vital for them at that stage. So I think it's really important that we think about the language we use and we think about how we're going to introduce things to our clients, and perhaps have some things alongside us that can be helpful, visuals, can be really, really useful. So thinking about the terminology we use as coaches and thinking about visual aids, I think, can be really helpful. And that's not to dumb things down or think that our clients don't have the capacity, but actually they've taken a step onto a journey. They might have quite a lot going on. So we just need to think about when we're going to bring things in and how we're going to do that. Other things that we might look at with them, particularly when we're thinking about overall hormonal balance at this stage, cycle syncing lifestyle, which can be really helpful for some clients, where we look at how we can align their movement, their diet and their rest alongside their menstrual phases. Stress management is such a difficult one because we live stressful lives, but I'm going to play bingo again, but chronic stress can give us elevated cortisol levels, which can suppress ovulation. So think about models and tools we might have for stress management. It could be introduction of some yoga, breath work, journaling. There's not going to be one size fits all. I can think of somebody who would absolutely hate it if I tried to introduce journaling to them. They would actually find that really stressful. So you've got to know your client and have some things that you might want to introduce, because we want a personalised plan. Tools need to be utilised to assess your client-specific symptoms so that you can then drive a really bespoke and personalised plan for them. Nothing generic, nothing that we've used time and time again, and it's just exactly the same plan. The things we might use could include symptom tracking, sleep diaries, dietary history to really assess where they're at. For a coach like myself, whose focus is on gut health to support overall hormone balance, symptom tracking might show they've got bloating, irregular bowel movements, fatigue, amongst others, but some of these can indicate a dysbiosis. Your dietary history might show certain processed foods. It could show a low fibre intake, which is really common, could show excessive sugar. All of these kind of things can disrupt the microbiome. So you need that information to help you make that personalised plan. As I said, we do focus on food. We're also going to focus on foundational gut health practices. So as coaches, we want to guide our clients to implement sustainable practices, things they're going to be able to maintain without us. So that focus on nutrition and food first is absolutely key. Things like increasing their prebiotics and probiotics, as we said, driving a fibre-rich diet, all really important. Diversity, gut microbial diversity is really important. So you want to talk about ways they can bring a variety of foods in, cycling through foods, rotating through foods, not relying on the same things for every meal. And I can be just as guilty as anyone for that. I have a favourite breakfast and you really have to give me a good shove to move me away from it. And there's so many other things I could be eating. So targeted supplementation can be helpful when appropriate, but alongside practitioner support, and really is probably going to be most useful when it's paired with focused functional testing, because how do we know what we're supplementing and why? We don't want to just be scrabbling around in the dark, and we want to make sure that it's within our scope. So that might be where we're working alongside another healthcare practitioner at that point. Also thinking about emotional support and practical support skills. So many women in this phase can be experiencing stress. They might be having changes in their career. They might be starting to think about beginning their family and what their fertility levels are like. Might be going through life transitions, planning a great big wedding, all sorts of things. So we want to create that non-judgmental space, somewhere where our clients can relax, they can feel heard and really supported. We can address emotional eating, stress-related habits, and all of these things can be tied to gut dysbiosis. As I said, we want to collaborate with other healthcare providers if needed. So if we suspect our client might have conditions like PCOS or endometriosis, that's going to be really important that we refer them on so that they can have dedicated support. Hormonal health through habit building. Teach our clients how to make small changes, daily changes that can have long-term impact. Sleep hygiene, changes in movement. So moderate physical activity can really improve the gut motility and your overall hormone sensitivity. So if we're not doing anything, we can just start to bring that in. And as a coach, we might think about developing key habit tracking tools that can help our clients build consistency and also celebrate small wins. because we want to keep moving forwards. It's really important we measure progress. Clients often need tangible proof that they've moved forward and they've achieved something. So you might be able to track things like energy levels, changes in how stable their mood is over a period of time, moving towards a more regular menstrual cycle, changes in their digestive health, no matter how small. Find a way where we can track these and really celebrate them. So use of an approach which is going to allow you to evaluate these things and really celebrate them with your client can help maintain engagement. Because coaching women through this phase, it's not just about offering advice and education. It's about fostering empowerment. It's about building consistency. And for somebody like me who looks at gut health, if we focus on this as a foundation for their hormonal balance, then we can equip clients with lifelong tools for resilience and well-being overall, which is really important. So, as I say, early adulthood is a time where we can plant the seeds, we can nurture those roots, we can create this really strong foundation that will sustain our clients through different phases of their lives. Conception's not just about creating life, it's about balance, strength, resilience, and it's a phase where women really can own their cycles and their body awareness. And we can really frame gut health, I think, as the root system from which balanced hormones and many other positive health outcomes can grow. So even if conception isn't on the immediate horizon for our clients, optimizing this gut health and in turn hormone health can now lay the groundwork for the best chances of healthy pregnancy and improved health outcomes down the line. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jodie. She's going to take us through the next phase.
Thank you, Daisy. So why do hormonal transitions matter? When we talk about hormone health, it's easy to focus on those physical symptoms like sleep, mood, fatigue. But what often gets missed in these phases of pregnancy, postpartum, and perimenopause is that it's deeply emotional and transformational for that woman. In these seasons where women not only experience hormonal shifts, but they're also redefining who they are. Their roles, their relationships, their values, and their bodies are changing, often all at once. And yet traditional healthcare systems don't often create a space for these identity shifts that we experience. Many women are left feeling unseen or told that it's just part of being a mum or a woman, or it's just, quote unquote, your hormones. And that's where coaching can become so powerful. We're not here to treat or diagnose, but we can offer something that's super valuable, a safe, non-judgmental place for women to unpack their experiences, explore how she feels, and to be supported in an emotional and practical way. When done ethically and within scope, coaching becomes that vital bridge between what's happening in a woman's body and how she can make sense of it in her life. So moving on to the first phase of pregnancy, and this can be one of the most exciting times of a woman's life. However, pregnancy can bring with it dramatic hormonal shifts, primarily increasing of the estrogen, progesterone, and the HCG hormones, which is your human growth hormone. And these create significant changes in the body and mind of a woman. One of the most reported symptoms would be no surprise that it's fatigue, particularly in that first trimester. And it's not just feeling tired, it is a deep, bone-heavy exhaustion that can make everyday tasks feel super overwhelming. Nausea can often be related to morning sickness, but it can last the entire day and can be triggered by strong smells or even emotional stress. And for some women, this symptom can be mild, and for others, it can be so debilitating. Mood swings and anxiety are often common, and these emotional shifts can be super intense. They can come often with this feeling of guilt and shame, especially if there's been a longing to be pregnant. Many women feel emotionally overwhelmed or tearful without any real common clear reason. And this is due to the psychological effects that the hormone surges and are having on a woman's body, but also the mental load of preparing for this major life change that's coming up. Body image concerns start in early pregnancy. It seems like everyone has an opinion on how big or small we are. And even before those visible changes happen externally, we start to internalize how our body is changing. So from weight gain to bloating to breast changes, this can all affect how a woman really feels about her body. We also start to see some identity shifts emerge at this stage. Questions such as like, who am I? Or how is my life going to change? And these thoughts often begin before birth and can be quite confusing and a process for a woman to go through. And lastly, sleep disturbances and food aversions and cravings can really disrupt a woman's ability to regulate her energy and her mood. And these seemingly minor symptoms can really significantly impact her quality life and her emotional well-being. So how, as coaches, can we support a soon-to-be mum during the pregnancy phase? Our work during this phase is super powerful, and not because we give answers or diagnose, but because we can offer something that a lot of women would not get during this time, which is space and validation. We begin by normalizing emotional complexities. Pregnancy is just a not one fit all experience. It's normal for joy to live alongside fear, uncertainty, and grief. But by creating spaces for all of the emotions that we're experiencing, we can reduce the shame and isolation that she may be experiencing. Supporting nervous system regulation, as Suzie mentioned previously, is really essential. A dysregulated nervous system can amplify stress, nausea, and fatigue, and emotional reactivity. We can guide clients in simple, accessible practices like mindful rest, breath work, or identifying her stress triggers and which happen in her daily rhythm. Education around nourishment and rest is often lacking in traditional care. And as coaches, we trained in women's health. We can offer education around blood sugar balance, protein intake, the importance of fiber, hydration, and rest, and not from a prescriptive place, but through an empowered choice where women can feel more in tune with what their body needs at that time. And boundary setting and self-trust become major themes. Many women, as I mentioned, start hearing everyone else's voices louder than their own, and they feel like they're being pulled in all different directions by family, providers, social media, and culture. And so we help her connect to what feels true for her in those moments and to hold that with confidence. And we can gently reflect on values and mindset. Tools like open-ended journaling prompts, visualizations, allow women to explore the kind of experiences that she would like to have, how she wants to feel, and what support she might need. We stay firm within scope, and that's really important. When symptoms signal something outside of coaching, such as mental health concerns, eating difficulties, or trauma triggers, we ensure that we refer out to appropriate professionals, reinforcing that women's care is a team rather than replacing. Our role is super powerful, excuse me, but we don't need to be everything to be effective. It's really important that we start to build a well-rounded referral list. And as a coach, it's imperative that you have those connections with other health providers. And if you are interested, on my website, I have a very wonderful list that I'm proud of women who I work with and refer to. And as coaches, remembering that we do not diagnose, but we understand the depth of diversity of the symptoms, and we show up with empathy, validation, and appropriate support. So moving on to the postpartum period, the WHO identifies that the postpartum period is one of the most crucial yet neglected phases in a woman's life, which makes me feel so sad because I experienced a terrible postpartum experience. After birth, estrogen and progesterone plummet, triggering what can feel like an emotional crash or roller coaster. This hormonal dip combined with sleep deprivation, physical healing, identity changes can deeply affect a woman's energy and mood and her confidence. We also start to see a depletion in minerals and vitamins. And according to Dr. Oscar Seralak, who I adore, over 50% of women will experience some level of postnatal depletion, and it can last up to 7 years, which I think is crazy if left untreated. Many women experience mood swings, heightened sensitivity, and unexpected emotional lows. Sleep deprivation isn't just a challenge to deal with, it compounds emotional dysregulation and that heightened feeling of anxiety and despair. Some mums report a sense of emotional isolation, even though they're surrounded by others. Physical symptoms such as hair loss, engorged breasts, night sweats, or vaginal bladder issues may be a really confusing and distressing situation for a woman, especially if she doesn't know that these are common experiences in early postpartum. In this stage, the weight of the invisible load becomes clear. Emotional labor, mental tasking, and the pressure to be grateful and glowing all create a real disconnect between how a woman feels and how they believe they should be feeling. It's important to remember that not all postpartum journeys are the same. For some, it's a time of intense bonding, and for others, it can be marked by depletion, trauma, and depression. And the role as coaches is to normalize that full spectrum of postpartum experience and support women with validation tools and meet them where they are. And I've included a quote here: just because it's common, it doesn't mean it's normal or easy. Many women get dismissed, and they deserve that support, and they deserve not to be dismissed and acknowledged. So how can we as coaches support a woman through this phase? Coaching in this phase becomes a really soft place for a woman to land when she's overwhelmed, exhausted, and feeling unseen. Our role again is not to fix her, but to listen, normalize, and support those gentle shifts that she's experiencing. By starting to validate the emotional complexity, that postpartum period, we should avoid the thought that it should be joyful all the time. It's really harmful that that narrative is there. Naming rage, grief, sadness, and that numbness feeling can create an immediate relief for her, and that connection that often a woman is missing during this time. Supporting her nervous system regulation, and as you'll see, it will be a theme through every phase. Grounding tools like breath work, body awareness, simple routines can make a huge impact. Education on nourishment and rest and on hormonal shifts is key in this period. We can educate how food and hydration support energy and mood, how rest and supports recovery, and how stress can impact our hormones. Always staying within scope, of course. For example, prioritizing blood sugar balance by encouraging meals every 3 to 4 years, 3 to 4 hours, not years, sorry, and making sure that they're protein rich. And if she does need to have a snack, fiber filled, protein rich, and avoid skipping those meals. Support iron and mineral replenishment to combat fatigue and restore post-birth nutrient losses. Iron-rich foods such as slow-cooked meats, lentils, dark leafy greens, making sure that they're paired with vitamin C like lemons or berries to improve that absorption. And to focus on anti-inflammatory foods to reduce that inflammation and to support healing and hormone regulation, such as salmon, avocado, sardines, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and a wide variety of fruits and vegetables is really important. Encouraging micro goals and identity reflection helps a woman start to come back to herself, even in small ways. It might look like a quiet cup of tea before the baby's awake, or journaling, or being confident enough to name what she needs out loud. It's really important that we do refer when appropriate. If there are any signs of thyroid dysfunction, postnatal depression, unresolved trauma, that we do refer to those allied health professionals while continue to hold that supportive space for her. This is a time for compassionate and collaborative care, and when done well, coaching can make a real difference in how a woman feels about herself and her motherhood experience. And this, for me, is a very deeply personal phase. It was a catalyst for why I studied the work that I did and the work that I do today. And I had completely different experiences. The first time around was horrendous. But the second time round, I was armed with education, awareness, and support. I took on all the support I could get. And whilst it wasn't perfect, it was a lot better. And it showed me the contrast of firsthand how much coaching can make a difference in a woman's life. And the last phase for me is that postpartum phase. So the signs and symptoms that she would experience. So we know that it's a very big hot topic at the moment, but it's also very misunderstood. It can start within early 30s, move to the 40s, and can last several years before menopause itself. According to the Endocrine Society, hormone fluctuations in this phase can lead to symptoms that are often misdiagnosed, dismissed as just aging, stress, season of life. Often known as the zone of chaos because of the extreme fluctuations that we can experience. This dismissal can leave us feeling so confused, unheard, and unsupported. We are changing so dramatically during this phase, and it can be a very confusing time. Common symptoms such as anxiety, brain fog, mood swings, changes in appetite, sleep, and feeling overwhelmed, and also weight gain, especially in that midsection due to the metabolic changes and that we experience. And fatigue is also another symptom that's reported. Many women find themselves questioning their purpose and struggling with clarity in their identity, especially as this stage of life overlaps with parenting young children. Many women feel lost or start to question their sense of purpose. And the overlap of parenting and perimenopause is increasingly common as women are having children later in life. This adds another layer of complexity and emotional regulation, energy demands, and self-perception. Women may feel like they're not coping like they used to, which is often interpreted as a personal failing rather than a physiological and emotional transition that she's experiencing. Our nervous system is on edge, and less progesterone equals less calm. And with the combined estrogen swings that we're experiencing, our stress response is in overdrive, making us more sensitive to that feeling of overwhelmed. So I've included on the next slide some alarming statistics. I personally think they're alarming, and I'm not sharing them to scare anyone, but really to bring to light the very real and often invisible upheaval that a woman will go through during this time. As you can see, 73% of women attribute menopause as a contributing factor to their divorce, which it blows my mind. And also suicide rates of the menopausal years have risen by 6% in the last 2 decades, which is really sad. The hormonal and identity and emotional changes that we experience during this phase can ripple into every part of a woman's world, her relationships, her mental health, and her sense of self. And these numbers remind us not just how important it is to support a woman, to make sure that she's seen during this time, to make sure that she's not alone in this transition. We can show why coaching with compassion and education and trauma awareness can be so transformative during this time. So how can we support her as a coach during this phase? It's one I feel very passionate about because I am deep in it myself. Um, and it shows up with so much complexity in a woman's life, especially when we're raising young children. Many women I work with are managing the changing hormones, disruptive sleep, short fuses, and those anger outbursts, identity shifts, all while parenting. And it can be a really intense collision of emotional, physical, and mental loads. So, as coaches, I really believe that we're not here to encourage a woman to push through, but we're here to ask her to slow down and to create clarity. Practical coaching tools become really essential during this time. I personally like to use value clarification questions to help her rediscover what matters to her in this moment. Weekly rhythm planning to prevent burnout, body awareness check-ins, so she can really start to tune in and to understand what her body needs in that time instead of overriding and pushing through. We can also guide women in using simple nervous system resets, such as breath work, grounding exercises, quiet rituals, the shift from survival mode to a more centered state. And I often help clients reflect on powerful questions such as, what do we need to let go of? What do I need to feel more like myself again? What does rest look like in this period of my life? Nutrition and lifestyle education is also key. It's very important during this transition, understanding the impacts of our blood sugar, inflammation, and how sleep affects our hormones and emotions, and help them apply these education and tools in a really mum-friendly way. And again, it's not about fixing her, it's about helping her feel strong, seen, and supporting while she is redefining and evolving in the next chapter of her life. So you can see here, coaching isn't about giving answers, it's about helping a woman reconnect to her voice. So coaching women during these hormonal transitions, whether it's pregnancy, postpartum, or perimenopause, is, I believe, some of the most transformative and important work that we can do as coaches. It's deeply meaningful. And what we offer isn't about fixing them, it's about seeing them. It's about creating the space where a woman can start to really tune in and hear her own voice again. We become that bridge between information and embodiment, between that lived experience and that gentle action. And we help women reconnect with themselves in that exact moment where they feel like they're disappearing or they don't quite understand what's going on. So that is me, and I'll hand over to Suzie again.
Thank you, Jodie. And I'm going to pick up right where Jodie is in perimenopause, and I'm going to move through the MAGA phase. No, do not worry. I will not be referencing Donald Trump, different kind of MAGA. Sometimes also known as the crone phase, the wise woman phase, the legacy phase, all of which I enjoy as titles because I think they really start to show us what this phase is all about. And we're going to encompass perimenopause, menopause, and right out the other side. This is a really transformative time in a woman's life, as Jodie has said, both biologically, energetically, but it is often under-supported and most definitely under-researched. Yet it can be a time that's really rich with purpose, a redefinition of health and vitality, and probably not going to be surprised to hear because of my specialism, but gut health continues to be essential, not just for managing symptoms through these phases, but actually beyond that, for longevity, for long-term cognitive function, for immune balance, and overall quality of life, I would argue. So we're going to have a little look at some signs and symptoms of perimenopause, menopause, maybe those that are considered a little bit more common and perhaps some that are not talked about as much. If you have a sign or symptom perhaps that you've experienced yourself, you've come into contact with clients or people in your kind of social circle, family, to do with perimenopause, menopause, that you think are maybe not mentioned, and they're not up here, can you just pop them in the chat so that we can see some of the other less common ones? That, you know, the common ones are talked about all the time, but yeah, I'm interested in some of the slightly unusual, and so when we ask this, we often find out lots of different kind of symptoms and signs, and it can be really useful. So pop them in the chat for me. In this phase, though, gut dysfunction can often amplify other symptoms and hormonal symptoms, because our decrease in hormone production and an increase in inflammation are really working against us. So, like I said, we've got some of the common ones on there: hot flashes, night sweats, etc. And we're going to have a look at some of them, and we're going to look at some of the less talked about. I'm not going to go through everything that's on there. It's important that I mention osteopenia and osteoporosis. And I think we sometimes think about these and we think about, you know, make sure we're drinking the milk, but actually it's more than that. Bones are dynamic tissues. They, you know, are remodeled, and there's a balance between osteoclasts, which are cells that break down old bone and reabsorption, and osteoblasts, which are cells that build new bone. And estrogen helps to inhibit osteoclast activity, which slows bone resorption. So when estrogen levels drop off at this time in life, osteoclasts can become overactive, and that's what leads to a faster rate of bone loss than bone formation for women in this phase of their life. So I think it's really important to understand the why, as well as perhaps how we can support them through it. Autoimmune conditions can be really, really prevalent and common conditions that can come out in menopause and post-menopause due to complex interactions that we have between our hormonal changes and the systems that modulate immune function. These are very complicated bedfellows. So when we see a shift in one, it can heavily impact on the other. Women can suffer recurring UTIs and other kind of vaginal infections. This is linked to microbiome shifts, and actually is down to the gut microbiome, vaginal biome relationship, which we will have a little look at later. Night sweats and heat flashes. I mean, yeah, I'm all over it. I'm all over it. It doesn't help that it feels like it's as hot as the sun in France at the moment. My hair is working incredibly hard to stay here and not, you know, just go like this. Very, very hot. So I'm all about that one. But it's actually because estrogen, again, it influences the hypothalamus. And this is really our kind of like our own temperature regulating center. Reduced estrogen levels, I'm going to be saying that a lot, disrupts the hypothalamus's ability to maintain a steady temperature and react to changes in temperature around us in the way that we would have been able to before. So even small changes we can be much more sensitive to. Digestive issues, increased bloating, constipation. This is because hormonal shifts will impact gut motility, and we'll see a shift in gut microbiota at this stage because of those hormonal shifts. So the microbes that we've got going on can change. Memory lapses, difficulty pulling that word. How many times a day must I go, you know what I mean? You know, the person's looking at me like, no, I don't, because you haven't actually used the word or any word associated with it, and you just expect me to know. You know, we really struggle to pull the, it's so frustrating. It's so incredibly frustrating. Again, this is due to those hormonal fluctuations, also down to the fact that possibly our sleep has been incredibly disturbed by the aforementioned hot flashes and night sweats. Also just stress levels that we're dealing with, you know, menopause and perimenopause, and dealing with all the things can be really, really stressful. So all of these things together can impair cognitive function and just make us feel like we're wading through treacle at times. Overall joint pain, stiffness, increased susceptibility to injury, And again, this is because estrogen has that anti-inflammatory effect, and its decline can really exacerbate inflammation in the joints. Okay, I'm going to touch on a couple of the less talked about ones. Burning mouth syndrome. So burning or tingling, or even some describe a metallic kind of sensation in the mouth or around the gums without any obvious cause. I've not been munching on chilies all afternoon, and this is because the change in estrogen levels can affect your salivary glands and your oral mucosa, which will lead to this strange sensation at times. Not for everyone, of course. Increase in body odor. It's like we're all the way back to being teenagers again, but it can be really noticeable for some, and this is because those hormonal fluctuations can affect sweat glands, which can potentially give you a shift in your normal, what's normal for you kind of smell. Tinnitus. I can barely think of anything worse. I do sometimes feel like I'm living with tinnitus, but it's actually my 3-year-old. Mom, 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 mom. It feels like perhaps I've got something else going on, but real tinnitus is a persistent ringing, buzzing in the ear, and you cannot shift it, and it can be quite debilitating for some, and that's because, again, estrogen plays a role in auditory processing, and the changes in that hormone can affect the inner ear. So we will have a look at some of the ones that were added in. I did see some of them flashing up. Michelle, don't get cross. Look, I'm going off. I'm going rogue now. I'm looking in the chat. What have we got? Peripheral neuropathy. Lots of people saying that's a strange one. Dry eyes, absolutely. Yeah. Somebody's saying they've heard that. Skin changes, easily irritated, anger, absolutely. Yeah. So somebody's got changes down the right-hand side. Really interesting. And I think we can be in real danger at this stage in our life of just kind of chalking things up to, well, I'm a bit older. It's just, it's just old age. But it's not. And often we can move through them, especially if we can find some things which can support these hormonal shifts. So whilst I can't, in good conscience, put every single sign and symptom that we might find during perimenopause and menopause down to changes in gut health, I think we can see actually that a huge amount are linked to those changes in estrogen. And if we think back to where we had all of those microbes which help us to regulate our estrogen levels, that was in our gut. So it's all just so intricately linked that, we can't get away from it. So gut health is still so important at this stage. Also, because about 70%, sometimes kind of quoted as 70 to 80% of our immune cells are actually located in our gut, and immune modulation is critical because inflammation increases in menopause because of that declining estrogen level. So we can experience more gut inflammation because we've got less estrogen giving us that anti-inflammatory effect. Sometimes the term inflammaging, I'm not sure about this as a term, but chronic low-grade inflammation, which is associated with aging. And this can often be gut-driven. So if we can, impact on that, we might actually see a real impact. Postmenopausal women show significant shifts in their gut microbiota composition. This can often be seen with a reduction in diversity. Estrogen and progesterone receptors exist in the gut, so hormone decline can affect gut motility, gut permeability, and our microbial balance. Postmenopausal women tend to have that decline in diversity, and this change in their microbial diversity in the gut has had links to cognitive decline, metabolic disease, and immune dysfunction. So some really key areas. So we can see that if we can address that and really work hard to keep that diversity and really work to stop that change, it can have a massive impact. Lower estrogen can also slow bile production. This impairs fat digestion, and estrogen detox pathways will then be affected. Estrogen actually plays a role in maintaining junctions in the gut lining. So when we see that decline in estrogen, we can get potentially leaky gut syndrome on the increase and that gut inflammation. The gut permeability increases due to aging and hormone loss. And this really can be the driver for systemic inflammation and those autoimmune triggers kicking in. Also, the gut-brain axis that we talked about earlier, also really important, because with estrogen in decline, we see neurotransmitters such as serotonin and GABA, which are both influenced massively by the gut microbiota. GABA is often actually kind of described as the brain's natural calming agent because it stops the overstimulation of neurons. So both of these, with the decline of estrogen, play a much larger role in mood and mental clarity without estrogen driving the impacts that it has done before. And because they are driven by and influenced so heavily by gut microbiota, it's important that we're keeping that in mind. And I mentioned earlier that we also see that loss of estrogen affecting the gut vaginal microbiome axis. So this is another system which is interlinked. So we have a really dynamic interplay between the microbial communities of the gut and the vagina. And actually, it wasn't until fairly recently where new things were discovered about the microbiome of the vagina, and actually how that shifts as you move kind of through the vaginal canal, really. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's like having a baby. So immune, hormonal and metabolic pathways are also massively at play with this. The axis plays a critical role in maintaining the health of both of those separate ecosystems, so in the gut and in the vagina. And they're both so heavily impacted during menopause that this is one of the main drivers between that increase in UTI recurrence for women and other infections such as bacterial vaginosis, really, really common to have recurring yeast infections as well. But it can also lead to vaginal atrophy, which will cause a thinning and drying of the vaginal lining. So we've got lots of things going on that are really interlinked and impacted here. Again, if we're thinking about food as first and key nutrition to support this time in our lives, food can really impact this transition when we're able to align it with what's going on in our body, the changes. So phytoestrogens can be really important because they can mildly help buffer that estrogen loss and have an impact on estrogen receptors. So we will find those in flax seeds, lentils and certain fermented soy such as tempeh and miso. We also want to make sure that we're encouraging anti-inflammatory foods. How many times we've just mentioned the increase in inflammation. So omega-3 rich foods, salmon, walnuts, chia seeds, and then also colourful polyphenol rich foods. So that's your really colourful fruits and veggies, berries, but also beets. You can also look at green teas, so matcha lattes, yeah, absolutely tick, turmeric, and I like to hold my significant reliance on coffee and caffeine just right here, because polyphenols can be found in coffee, so I'm hanging off of that. Also digestive support in terms of thinking about trying to counteract that reduction in diversity. So fermented foods can really help that. So as we talked about earlier, things like your natural yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, they're really going to be important. But also work with your clients to think about digestive friendly habits that they can incorporate that they might not at that time, because there's lots going on. There's so much change actually. Food can become a difficulty and meal times and at this particular phase. So smaller meals, mindful eating, digestive bitters or enzymes can really help some people, and also really focused on hydration. Those bitters can really stimulate stomach acid and bile production, which we mentioned earlier. So yeah, smaller meals can really help bring down bloating for some. And then also fibre and prebiotics, cannot overlook them. They, as we said, will feed that beneficial bacteria and support estrogen metabolism within the gut. So again, some good examples: leeks, Jerusalem artichoke, although I would with that one recommend buying it pre-chopped up. If you've ever spent time just getting the good bit of a Jerusalem artichoke, it's hardly anything, and it'll take you ages. So buy it in a jar. I wouldn't normally recommend that. Buy it in a jar. Chicory, oats, also really good. And there was some recent research. It was really recent. It was in May 2025 by scientists based out of the University of East Anglia. And they found that the modulation of estrogen through the gut's estrobolome, we're back to that, may offer an explanation for some of the differences that can be observed during menopause, e.g. length, symptoms, disease risk in women. So therefore, if we think about that, a therapeutic modulation of the gut microbiota therefore could represent a potential approach towards managing menopausal symptoms. Prebiotics and probiotics, particularly things such as lactobacillus, have been shown to increase bacterial diversity and improve metabolic and overall health in menopausal women. However, evidence still remains very limited. Like I said, this study was only published in May. It's very limited regarding the specific underlying mechanisms at play. So this, to me, just highlights the need for further research into this area. So if we think about this as coaches and how we might support women at this phase, because beyond food, there's a significant amount of wider holistic support that we can tap into and we can use for our clients. Lifestyle and stress management will be vital. We know that chronic stress will exacerbate hormonal imbalances. It overstimulates that HPA axis. It can increase cortisol. And we know that this can impact sleep, weight, mood. So stress management techniques being taught with our clients can be really helpful. Mindfulness, meditation, breath work, muscle relaxation, nature therapy, and these things, it's gonna depend on your client. Sleep optimization definitely shouldn't be overlooked. We talked earlier about the impact that night sweats can have, amongst other things, and all of those hormonal shifts can really change your sleep pattern. So we can work with our clients to create different bedtime routines, better bedtime routines, any bedtime routine, depending on where they are currently. I have been working on that with my mum for about 20 years though. And I feel like we're no further along. So if anybody wants to take my mum on, please drop me a message. She'll doze in the chair until 2, then get up and mop the kitchen floor. Not helpful, but there we are. We can support the creation of this routine, even reducing screen time and some of those other elements that can help. We can also look for techniques to address some of those nighttime symptoms, the hot flashes. What can we do to support those? And support overall serotonin and melatonin production through lifestyle changes, and they are vital for sleep regulation. As coaches, you can introduce stress and sleep logs to help track what's going on, and then when we introduce things, the improvements, and also it helps our clients connect habits to outcomes, which can be really helpful. When we're looking at movement and physical activity, really important, and we really want to focus on 3 key areas with that. Weight-bearing exercises. We want to build, maintain bone density, which we talked about declining earlier. So strength training, yoga, Pilates. If your clients haven't experienced strength training before, then you're going to need to start slow, but it's really, really important that we build it in a way that works for them. Aerobic activity. Just because we're now introducing strength training, we don't want to lose that. Moderate activities such as brisk walking, cycling, swimming can be really, really beneficial. And then flexibility and mobility, so important. So gentle practices like Tai Chi, restorative yoga, these can all help have a positive impact on joint health and reduce overall stiffness. You want to be looking at a movement plan that is tailored to your client's current fitness levels, their preferences, their lifestyle. These things should help support a curated collection of targeted resources and targeted support that you can use with your client. This would feed into looking at their emotional and mental well-being. We want to, as coaches, as Jodie said earlier, normalise the emotional ups and downs. We want to offer a safe, judgment-free space where our clients can be open and share their feelings and meet them where they are. We do want to help them to build emotional resilience. Perimenopause and menopause can bring really huge emotional shifts due to those fluctuating hormones. So we want to foster self-compassion and acceptance in our clients of where they are at this stage in their life. So perhaps tools which will help manage mood swings or anxiety could be helpful. I also think it's really important not to overlook community and connection. So thinking about support groups or connection with peers who might be navigating similar experiences so that we feel less isolated and alone can be really important. You perhaps as a coach might look to share resources or organise workshops that focus on empowerment during this phase. So depending on your own strengths and areas of expertise, you might like to think about workshops on understanding menopause better, arming your clients with education. You could invite gynecologists, endocrinologists to support that. Perhaps something empowering body image. It could be focused on nutrition for emotional well-being. It could be focused on sexual health. It really depends on your own expertise. But again, it can be a great way to collaborate and work with others to support your clients. With regard to resources, it might be resources of your own, but do ensure that they are targeted and purposeful rather than generic. It might be external resources that you think are useful. It could be books. There's things like Menopausing by Davina McCall, which she did alongside a doctor. There's podcasts. The Happy Podcast is one of them, but there are lots. But I would say you need to have listened to the podcast, read the book, whatever the resource is, before you're recommending it out, just so that it works with your vibe, I think, and is going to be useful for your client. Also, a removal or a decrease in environmental and lifestyle toxins might be something you want to explore. So endocrine disruptors are prevalent, and they are chemicals that interfere with the normal function of our body's endocrine systems, which is used to regulate hormones. So perhaps exploring with clients how they could minimise exposure to these chemicals, which can be found all over the place in plastics, makeup, personal care products, household cleaners, and they can mimic and or interfere with our normal hormonal activity, which at this stage, any stage we don't want, but particularly here where we're going through such massive shifts. You can introduce alternatives, so getting rid of the plastic for glass and natural cleaning agents, etc. And also perhaps think about how you can look at a reduction in lifestyle toxins. So that could be caffeine and alcohol. Discuss the impacts of these on some of the symptoms, depending on where your clients are, and suggest a moderation, something that they could modify and change. Provide a gradual plan. You can't just expect somebody to tip their whole house and life upside down. Let's think about how we can move it gradually to a place where they want to get to, so that we're not overwhelming. We've mentioned cognitive health. This is really, really important, that brain fog. So encourage practices that enhance focus and memory. So puzzles, learning new skills, particularly musical instruments and languages, have been shown in research to have such a significant impact. So, you know, it's never too late to start learning French or Spanish or Mandarin, or picking up, I don't know, the flute, the clarinet, whatever they fancy. But these new skills, they, you know, get another part of the brain working, and it can just be really, really helpful. Sexual health, pelvic health, these can be really important at this stage. Women can be dealing with low libido. They can be dealing with intimacy issues, because the hormonal changes can really impact that. Our vaginal health can be, you know, really changing and fluctuating at this point. So you could look to provide some strategies to address this. Communication strategies with their partner, pelvic floor exercises, lubricants, etc. Things that might be really helpful. But also, this can be vital to collaborate with pelvic health nutritionists, sexual health specialists, physiotherapists, when your client needs specialised care. And integrative wellness practices and complementary therapies can also be really useful. Some clients might gain symptom relief from options such as acupuncture, massage, aromatherapy. And you might also want to discuss evidence-based supplements such as magnesia or omega-3s. But I would just put a word of caution. Make sure you stay in scope. It wouldn't normally be within the scope of a health coach due to the wider knowledge needed to ensure there was no harm done through inappropriate dosage or drug interactions. So it's really, really important that we think about where we are with our scope and, if necessary, support your client to work with other clinical practitioners. If you are using functional testing that is supported by clinical practitioners and doctors, often this can be something that comes alongside that, but it is the doctor, the healthcare professional who is providing that advice as part of the analysis of the functional testing, depending on which company you use. And again, celebrate those small wins, build that motivation. So if we can combine these approaches with gut-focused strategies, we can create a comprehensive support system that can address physical, emotional, and social dimensions of health during perimenopause and menopause. So I think this stage of life is often framed quite negatively as a time of decline or a time of loss. And I would like to see it reframed as a period of deep-rooted transformation and empowerment, where women can now prioritise themselves, they can redefine goals, they can embrace vitality. Gut health can support this clarity, it can support having a voice and finding a power, because that second brain, when we're faced with estrogen levels flattening out, the gut-brain axis becomes the main driver of our cognition, mood and vitality at this time. So it's really important. And a well-nourished gut in this phase can have impacts on the risk of Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other autoimmune issues. The microbiome can be your ally in longevity and legacy building. And I want to empower women at this phase to have a voice, to no longer feel that they are being sidelined, that they've been pushed to the back of the shelf. I want to encourage them to embrace this change and step forward, because actually they have so much to offer because of the life that they will have lived to get to this point. So as coaches, I think we've got the power to challenge the societal narratives and really foster a culture of celebration and renewal for women in this phase particularly. I think as coaches, we can be catalysts for a real ripple effect. We empower one client, which then can transform a family, which can transform a community, which can have a wider impact on society. And I think that's really important. Jodie, what would you say you would like people to perhaps take away as some of the key points from this evening?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for sticking around. I know it's been a very informative, long webinar, but hopefully you've taken a lot out of this. For me, I think I would really like others to take away the importance of nutrition in every stage of a woman's life. It can be so impactful on her mood, energy. It just impacts the whole woman. Secondly, understanding that each transition is an opportunity to redefine. We go through seasons of life, and if we really lean into them and take out what they could mean, they can be so transformative. So understanding that even though we do have those physical symptoms, there is often the transition and upgrading and evolving of who we are. And then I love what you said, Suzie, as we've come to the end, that this stage of our life, menopause, perimenopause, it doesn't have to be one of, oh, just put us on the shelf, we're getting old now, we have no value. I think we offer so much wisdom. And I would love society and us to embrace that a little bit more. And thirdly, the importance of connection and community. And obviously gut health is very important. For me, I've taken away, I really need to focus on my gut health a little bit better. But community and connection, I think, is so imperative for a woman's well-being Often we feel so isolated in our experiences. For some reason, we hold it all in. We don't really feel comfortable talking about a lot. And coaching can offer a really safe space where we can really hold her. And I think that adds so much value to a woman's life. So hopefully you've taken some of that out of this and have enjoyed your time here.